Okay. Hey, everybody. So welcome to How to Go from Zero to Hero with your grant strategy in under 60 minutes. This is actually a special workshop just for readers of Garrett.com. So I'm so glad to have you here. This workshop is being recorded and slides will be shared afterwards. So definitely keep your eyes open for a follow-up email from me later, just in case you want to review anything from today or share any of this with your colleagues. It's always free content for everyone. And if you haven't already, if you're just joining us, go ahead and share in the Zoom chat. It would be great to hear from you. Would love to know a little bit about kind of where you're calling in from, what organization you're with, and what your greatest challenge is related to grants. All right, so jumping into it here, can you all see my screen okay? Let me know if you can't see it for any reason. But I am Celia from Instrumentl. I run partnerships and I do special webinars like this, as well as our regular workshop series. So if you haven't already checked out our regular workshop series, I highly recommend it. These are free educational workshops where we tackle a problem that grant professionals often have to solve. And we also sort of share different processes, tools, and systems to tackle them. Along the way, I will show you a little bit about how we use Instrumentl's platform to do so, but it's always great content whether or not you're using Instrumentl. If you are new to us, if this is your first time here, your first time with me, or your first time with Instrumentl, Instrumentl is the institutional fundraising platform. So we have grant prospecting, tracking, and management all in one place, and we help more than 2,000 nonprofits in winning more grants with less work. And so what that means is that every day we hear and see what blocks nonprofits from achieving their grant seeking goals. And a lot of that knowledge and kind of findings and learnings over the years is what has led us to this presentation today. So I am going to kind of get started here. So I would love to hear from you all. Drop a little emoji in the chat if any of this stuff resonates with you. Would love to know kind of who's feeling what, right? So maybe if you are sort of in the grant world, and I think I saw some of this in the chats, right? You might feel kind of ill-prepared in your organization's ability to consistently find good fit funders and apply for grants. Or maybe that's not you, but maybe you feel a little overwhelmed by your list of to-dos and all the things to do when it comes to grant writing. So you might have to sort of find the opportunity, vet the opportunity, see, if you have the bandwidth to actually apply for that opportunity and then do the reporting. And then you actually have to apply, right? And then you have to do the reporting on top of that. And so I think all of that can become a little bit overwhelming. So definitely drop an emoji in the chat if any of this is resonating with you all. Sometimes I feel like this dog on the keyboard myself. And maybe you're not feeling overwhelmed. Maybe you sort of, what it is, but you just have writer's block. And so you're actually ready to start, but you sit down at the computer and you stare at that blank screen and you just kind of think, oh man, as much as I want to write this, there's just some things that maybe you don't know, or you want to get some more relevant information out of that application to feel confident and ready and excited to kind of write. Yeah, Deanne is definitely resonating with you. Tina, you as well. I totally hear that. So whatever it is, these are all things that you shouldn't feel alone in, right? So we are in a group. We've got a couple people on today. I think you will see in the chat, a lot of people are kind of feeling similarly. When it comes to grants, it can be a lot to take on. And so if you're feeling this way, you may end up thinking to yourself, are grants worth the effort, right? So again, drop an emoji in the chat or a little emoji on your screen if this has ever been you. Is this worth it? Should I just give up? Or just not even get started if you're sort of new to this like Nathan is? And the answer is unequivocally yes. Grants are definitely worth it. And the reason that they're worth it is because there's so many out there. There's just so much out there. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why these are powerful, but we have 87,000 grant makers out there. We have 12,000 alone on Instrumentl, and we're adding a couple hundred a week. So that goes to show you sort of at a macro level, there is tons of opportunity regardless of what kind of project you're working on, what kind of organization you are. And I often hear from people that maybe they struggle to expand their search beyond sort of the local opportunities. So maybe you've been doing this for a while, you've really kind of tapped out what is available, excuse me, at a local level. And so maybe you're thinking about, okay, how do we go to the next? How do we go to the sort of state or regional or federal level when it comes to our grant opportunities? And so it's there's tons of opportunities out there. So the answer is definitely yes. Another thing I want to note as we kind of get started here. Hey, Susan, thanks for joining us. Another thing that I want to mention here as we get started is that I know the last couple of years have been rough, right? Like name a person who hasn't felt like the last couple of years been a little rough for us. And what that means is that nonprofits, maybe you're one of them, are kind of feeling a pinch, right? So in 2021, nonprofit employees were expecting cost cuts. We also saw a drop in individual campaigns for a period of time, but we also saw a boost in foundation giving. And that is important because all of this really underpins the need to have a diverse funding strategy, right? So it goes back to that old saying, you don't want all your eggs in one basket. We want to think about funding in lots of different areas to ensure that we're sort of covered no matter what kind of comes down the pipeline. So if you're new to nonprofits, or you're just new to grants, or you're just looking at grants as a way to diversify, or maybe you've been doing grants for a long time and you just want to get quicker, we are going to talk about all of that today and kind of get you to the next level when it comes to grant funding. So where are we going? What are we going to talk about? Well, in the next 40 minutes or so, I'm going to explore some helpful ways to think about kind of a problem that we're all facing, right? So we're going to start with, why are grants powerful? Why do we care? And then we're going to talk a little bit about what is prospect research? Why is it important? And then I will, including kind of what are we thinking about? What are we asking? What kind of questions do we need to figure out when we're doing prospect research? Then I'm going to share some tips on how do we prepare our organization for success when it comes to grants. And finally, I will wrap it up with how to find good fit funders. If you stick with me to the end, I have a couple of really exciting things. I have an awesome freebie for you all. And then I will also show you how to get started on Instrumentl, and you can leave today with your own free list of good fit funders, which you can start working through on your own. So, yeah, stick with me to the end. I have a 40-page research, a 40-page piece of research, which goes through 16 really important questions to ask during prospecting. So you'll definitely want to hang on for that. All right. Why are grants so powerful? Well, grants are powerful because of a couple of things, right? First thing to think about here is that they really hit a broad set of funding opportunities that come with grants, right? So whether you're looking for, really generic sort of operating level funding, or if you're thinking about something more specific, there's lots of options out there. So I want you to look at these categories and sort of jot them down. You can put it in the chat if you want to tell us about it, but I want you to kind of think about, where do you think you fit in? Where are the areas that you currently in your business need to kind of focus on funding, right? Is it outreach? Is it education? Is it capacity building, right? So think about that, jot it down, or kind of keep it in the back of your head, because this is going to come up a little bit later. But the point here is we can really drill into what we need and kind of cut out the noise and stand out. So if you know you need computers for an after-school program, you can find a less competitive grant, potentially that's focused on something like, capital projects or capacity building, right? That you can kind of focus your energy on there, and then be a little less competitive in your grant process. Another reason that grants are so powerful is because the dollars are there. So while some people are sort of working on individual giving campaigns, they might be up against changing economic systems, right? We might be up against things like inflation or, spending power of people kind of falling, right? Whereas when we're talking about grants, we are talking about foundations a lot of the time. And what's great about foundations is they have to give. They have to give every year. There's no option to just kind of like hang on to that money, right? And this is a quick tip that I want to give you. I would love to hear from you in the chat. Have you heard of this before? Are you familiar with the minimum giving rule? Tell me about it. I want to know if any of you have heard of this before, but this is a rule you should know about if you don't already know about it, but essentially it requires that foundations give about 5% of their average market value of their net assets every year. And because it's a distribution, some of it will go to admin costs, but the vast majority of it is going to grants. And so seeing foundation on the side that I have, I can assure you there is plenty out there for folks. So definitely you want to look at that. So one of the things that we should be thinking about when we review funders and their 990 forms, right, to figure out like, what do they have to give? Is this a good fit? Is we want to think about what are those key assets. We want to check that key assets piece when we're looking at 990s, and we want to multiply that key asset number by 0.05 or 5% to see kind of what that organization can give. And that might look like this, right? So here we are. This is sort of a digitized version of a 990 report in Instrumentl, but you'll see here total assets are around 2.9 billion. If we multiply that by 5%, that's $146 million that this organization is able to give every year. And so this is a great potential option, right? If everything else matched up. We can actually see that they gave more than 146 million. So they actually gave about 172 million last year. That's kind of interesting. Or in 2019, this is a little bit old, but so this is just a quick trick to think about as you're working through some of those 990 reports, and can help you figure out if this is a good fit. Does it meet your potential funding needs? Is it too small to work with? These are kind of questions you can answer here. All right, so you might be saying like, great, Celia, that's a single year that organization gave, $145 million or whatever it is. But another thing I really like about grants is they're very consistent. Foundations are very consistent in their giving, right? So one thing we see over and over from our side of things is that foundations like to give to repeat grantees. And so thinking about kind of how does this plug into my longer life cycle? How does this plug into the longer plan of my organization? Grants are awesome because once you kind of get into a cadence with a foundation, they know you hit your reporting goals. This can become just something that you're renewing every year. And it can become something that you can count on. And so you can start building out your organization and sort of scaling your organization, knowing that you most likely are going to have the funding because you've established a relationship with an organization that does consistent giving. And a lot of these foundations, the vast majority of them, are doing consistent giving in some capacity, right? And this kind of takes me to my next point of why grants are powerful, and that is that they can be systematized. I personally am a very process-oriented person. I like little things. I like Legos. I like building stuff, right? And so I really appreciate that grants are something that allow us and encourage us to build a system. And so what that means that there's clear steps to doing a grant, right? I know that there's like a step 1, a step 2, a step 3, and that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about those first couple of steps, but once you get that system in place, what that means is that I can manage my time. I know how long this is going to take. I know what step 1 takes. I know what step 2 takes. I know what step 3 takes. I can plan out my goals, and then I can actually hit goals. So instead of maybe my executive director coming to me and saying, hey, we're going to 2x our grant funding this year. And I say, okay, and then I've got to figure out how to make that work. I can actually look at it and say, well, to 2x our grant, we're going to need to do twice as many grants, which means we're going to have to do twice as many of these tasks, which is going to require, whatever, right? So now I have some data, some information, a system, a process to kind of go back to my team and say, these are the resources I need if I'm going to hit these goals. Beyond that, so another thing that that people really like about grants is it keeps organizations accountable. What does that mean? Well, it means that you have an immediate feedback loop, right? As opposed to maybe a gala or some kind of community event, you throw the event is successful. After the event, there's really no reason to collect any data on like, what did we do with that funding? Did it work out? Did it not work out? Because nobody's asking you for that. The community that showed up didn't say, hey, in 6 months, you're going to have to send me a report on whether or not this works. And so you're not really sure. You're out there, you're maybe putting a ton of effort into throwing these events without a really clear idea on, was this valuable? And so grants are nice because the organizations that are granting the funds, they're asking you for this information. So you can collect that information on a cadence, you can plan on it. And when it comes time next year, you have that information, right? And you're not trying to sort of scramble at the last second to find some key important information to sort of increase giving. So that is kind of why grants are so powerful. So as we're sort of thinking through this, we're going to talk more about kind of some prospect research things. And as we do, essentially what I want you to start thinking about is what is the power of grants, right? And I'd love to see you add it into, yes, Drew, we are sharing the presentation after this. So definitely hang on and look out for my email. But I would like to see you all add in the chat. Please follow along. There's only 20 of us in there, so I'd love to make this a little bit of a community. What are you thinking about? As I just went through this, as I just went through why grants are powerful, what do you think? Do you agree with me? Do you think I'm full of it? Like, do you see grants as being a key piece of your organization? What is this bringing up for you? What are you thinking about? This is a great way. We might sort of give other people ideas. Susan, yes, thank you. I love that validation. Incredible. Great. Cool. So yeah, as we're sort of moving on to the next process, I'd love to see you all kind of share in the chat a little bit of information on, you know, how are you thinking about this? You might give some people another ideas. All right, Fabiana, we are definitely going to talk about how to set up a system and expand your grants. Awesome. Yes. That's awesome, Heather. I'm glad to hear that. Grant sustained therapeutic services for your patients. Yeah, very important. Okay, so we're moving on. We are moving on. So we just talked about why grants are powerful. Now we're going to talk about prospect research. This is a very important piece in the grant process. And so I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes on it. We could spend hours on it, but we're going to just kind of dive in. And I do have a resource for you all towards the end of the session today, which will help you do more grant prospecting and quicker. So I'm going to kind of zoom through this portion, but definitely stick with me because that resource, that 40-page resource I have at the end for you is going to be hugely, I think, beneficial in thinking about this. So what is prospect research? Let's jump into it. Well, we are talking about this specifically in the context of grants. You may be familiar with prospect research. It's a pretty broad term in the world of kind of nonprofit funding, right? But in the context of grants, this is the process of finding, assessing, and qualifying public, private, and corporate foundations to pursue more strategic and planned giving. So in this chart, you see this wheel, right? It's going around and around. And this is the typical grant life cycle, right? So we start with kind of coming up with an idea, right? What kind of programs do we want to do? Maybe it's therapeutic help for your patients, right? And then we talk about, okay, what funding is out there for me? What do I need? Then I develop my proposal. I submit my proposal. If I'm lucky, if I did a good job, if I found the right fit, I get that award, and then I have to manage it, and I have to follow up with the reporting, and then I start all over again, right? So this is the life cycle. We are in the find your funding phase, right? So we're in that little green bottom right arrow here. That's what we're talking about today. So you're starting to work on programs. You're going to be looking at ways to find funding, and that's what we're doing, right? So with good prospect research, organizations can get away from being so reactive, and this can really become a system. This can be something where I know where I am in this life cycle at any given moment. I know what to prioritize. I'm not just showing up for work and overwhelmed by everything that has to go on. I've got a system. And why is this so important? Well, it's important because and I like this quote a lot. It's from Network for Good. It's a great quote. But essentially, 40% of donors in a recent study admitted that they could give more. So what does that mean for you, right? Well, it means that the role of prospect research is to hop on that train, right? We don't want to start flat-footed. We don't want to start from zero. We want to start with momentum. We want to find these donors that could be giving more, and we want to encourage, we want to move them up to higher levels of giving. And that's why prospect research is so important, because we got to find them first. We got to figure out, like, are they available? Are they not available? And so that's kind of what we're talking about. And I like to tell this story when I get to this portion, because I had a client not that long ago who told me that they were starting their own nonprofit. They'd spent years kind of volunteering in a foundation in a sort of similar area. And they were like going to go out on their own. She was like really excited. She was like going to go out there and she was going to like start her own thing. So I started talking to her about grant funding. She was looking for funders, and actually using Instrumentl, she found out that that organization she had volunteered with for, a decade was a grant maker. She had no idea. It was not something that had ever come up. It was not anything she had ever known about. And then all of a sudden she realizes, hey, I've known these people for a decade. I have a great relationship with the board. I've got a great relationship with the executive director. And now I need funding and they can do funding. And just like that, she was able to move into kind of her first grant award. And I love that story because that just tells you the importance of prospecting research. There may be organizations in your backyard that you already have relationships with who are able to give money, and we want to find them. So, all right, cool. So, that's great. Great. We need to do prospect research. So helpful. Okay. What does that mean? What am I looking for? What questions should I be asking? Well, here's a couple. I want to caveat this before I jump into it with every organization's a little different. And the things that you may look for in prospect research are going to be very specific to your organization. These are some really high level ones. It's a great place to start. As you get more comfortable with grants, I think you'll find that there's sort of some different avenues out there for you, right? So on this slide, what I think is most relevant is things like key assets, right? So we talked about this, 5% giving. How much do they have? How much can they give? Really important thing to know, right? Another thing to look at is key people. So again, this goes back to my example of the client that I had who was starting her own thing. Being able to see like who's on the board, do I have a relationship with them? You're starting to warm those waters, and that's going to make it a lot easier for you to potentially win a grant. And we want to be looking at who are the key people and can we get an introduction to them. We also want to be looking at giving trends and cycles over the years. And I always like to highlight the importance of the trend over the kind of single data point, because it tells a bigger story, right? We like lines, we like trend lines. We don't necessarily like data points because we get more information when we see what's happened over time. We learn more about the organization. So we want to look at their giving trends over the years. So I find when I do development, when I talk to development people about their prospecting, what I like to tell them is look at past grantees. Is there an overlap, right? Are there projects that were funded that are similar to your project? And then let's focus on that, right? And the theory is, why bother looking at all the general grant opportunities out there when I can find ones that I know are specific to my area? And that leads me to geographic focus, right? So some organizations have a geographic focus. We want to make sure we understand that. And that if I'm in Texas and I'm focused on things going on in Texas, that I am looking for organizations that fund Texas. And maybe I don't spend as much energy on the foundation that funds organizations mostly in California, right? And I'm focusing my energy there. And then obviously is grant eligibility, right? Do I meet the minimum requirements? Am I aligned at a mission level with this organization, right? And so these are just a few things to think about. Again, You will learn as you continue this process. Start small. Start with 4 or 5 points that you know you look at when you do prospecting. I guarantee you will start to find other little trends, other little things to look at, but this is the place to start. I'm actually just going to zoom through this because we're going to talk about this a little bit later, and I want to make sure we stay good on time here. But again, stick with me. I've got 16 more questions to help you in your prospecting research. So as you're thinking about what's important, it's a really good way to start. So stick with me. I'm giving that out at the end. So just hang in there with me. Okay, great. So we have gotten through why are grants important? You know, why are we doing them? We have talked about what is prospect research and why do we care and how do we do it? And finally, well, not finally, I guess, now we're at the next section, which is how do we actually prepare for grants, right? So what are the steps that will allow us to kind of prepare for these? So if you're attending today, I've already seen it in the chat. You're interested in grants, you think they might be a good way to either start fundraising or diversify potentially what you're already doing. Or maybe you don't know where to start, right? So this is our step-by-step guide on where to begin to go from zero to hero when it comes to grants. As I hop into this, I really like this quote. Essentially the quote says, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. Your goal is your desired outcome. Your system is the collection of daily habits that will get you there, right? So I just like to highlight this as we hop into this section because a lot of times people just get really focused on the outcome. We want to raise, we need $50,000 in funding. Okay, well, how do you get there, right? And so I'll talk to people and they'll tell me what their goal is. And I say, well, what are you going to do to get there? And they say, I don't know. And I don't think that's a good place to start, right? Because we've got to start with steps. We've got to be able to say, well, this worked and that didn't work. And this is how long it took and kind of go there, right? And so I don't want to be flippant here. I know that this takes time to set up. It doesn't happen in a day, but if we can start with some of the basics, we can build on them over time. And before we know it, we will have a full system. So if you don't have a system right now, don't worry about it. That's what we're going to talk about. So let's hop into it. This is enough lead up, right? Okay. Number one, the first step in preparing for grants is to make sure you're discoverable. All right. I cannot tell you the number of times I talk to nonprofits and they're still working on their website, or they don't have a mission on their page or their impact or their history. You have to have that stuff there. So key questions to answer. Is it clear within 1 minute of coming to your website what your mission is and how you measure your impact? If that's not clear, you need to redo your homepage. And the reason for that is because things are online, right? We know this. 2020 took us from being mostly digital to like completely digital, right? And we're seeing that reflected in the nonprofit and the funding space, right? In 2021, the IRS mandated that everyone make their 990s digital, right? And so that we could put that online. So we're seeing this movement towards folks wanting to be able to see is what's in your proposal, is what's in what you submitted to me, the grant maker, can I validate that? Can I go to your website and see that that's accurate? Is that in there for me to look at? The next thing to think about on your homepage is, do you have detailed case studies with contact information on projects? So again, that is validating, are you doing what you said that you're doing? And are you reporting on that? Are you already coming up with and sort of have a system around telling me, was this applicable? Was this useful for you? So those are kind of the two. If you're just starting out, you may not have case studies and contact information like specific to projects. That makes sense. But you can definitely get your homepage set up in a way where you're really clear on what you want to do and how you're going to measure it. If you're brand new, don't worry about that case study part. We're going to hop to step 2, which is a great place to also kind of begin if you're brand new. Okay. So step 2 is to ask for help from your community and from your board, right? And a lot of people don't ask for help. A lot of us struggle with, I know I struggle with asking for help sometimes. It's so much easier, especially in this kind of service world that we work in, to sort of take it on and say, I'm going to do this. But I think it's really important that we are sort of using our community to help us get to where we want to get. And the easiest way to do this, the easiest way to move the needle is to ask for referrals. So we want to think about this in steps. We want to start local, then we move regional, and then finally we go national, right? So if I've got a small organization, I can ask my board, do you know any of these local grant makers? And once I've sort of gotten my feet wet with working with like local proposals, local grants, now I've got something to base off of. And I can say, okay, well, I've already done the local one. I can use some of that as I move to regional. So we want to start small. We want to start in the less competitive spaces where we have potential relationships, where we can get referrals, and we can sort of start to build out kind of a use case. We're able to build out those case studies so that as we move up to regional and federal, sort of higher levels of funding, higher levels of competitiveness, we have something to kind of point back to and say, hey, listen, we started local. We've got this that we can work off of, right? All right. And as you're preparing, what I want you to do is I want you to ask your board about any suggestions on foundations they have. This is a fantastic way to engage your board, right? Hey guys, here's a list of good fit funders that I found through Instrumentl on a webinar that I was on this week. Who do you know on this board, right? Who can you help me connect with? How can you help me? Who can you go on LinkedIn and kind of figure out that you're already connected with them and make an introduction for me? This is a great ask of your board and something that you can do really easily once you have that list of kind of short list of funders, right? So that's step 2. Move into step 3. And step 3 is around strategically outlining our funding strategy, right? So again, we're thinking about this as a process. This is not just willy-nilly. This is not, hey, I've got an idea, let me apply for a grant. This is step-by-step process, which sets us up with a foundation that supports the organization to scale, right? So we want to think about, what are we doing? What do we need from our funding strategy? So a couple things to think about and to include in that strategy are, 1, what are your biggest resource needs? If you're looking for grants, the idea is that it's going to offset some other needs, right, in terms of funding. So what are those? Is it staff? Is it tech? Is it programming? What are those specific needs? Next, goals and priorities. So that leads into overall priorities. And this is more at this sort of organizational level. What do you want to achieve this year within the organization? Do you want to serve 3 times as many people as you served last year? Do you want to expand your operations into the next town over? What are your priorities? What are your goals? Get kind of clear on that, because that's going to help think about what kind of funding you need. How are you going to track those things, right? So how are we tracking things going? Think about that, because remember the wheel, remember the life cycle, the grant life cycle, right? Once we get through award, we've got to report on it, right? So we've got to be able to tell people, did this work? Did this not work? That's going to help us. That's going to be the flywheel that throws us into being able to get additional funding. So we want to make sure, how are we going to track this? And what outcomes are we tracking? What do we want to report on? My tip here, think about SMART goals. If you're not familiar, Google it, SMART goals. We have a great blog post on the Instrumentl website with Dr. Bev Browning on how to write SMART goals. So what do we want to try to measure, and can we measure it? It's great to shoot for the moon, but if it's going to take up your whole organization's resources to sort of measure those outcomes, probably not worth it, right? So we want to think about what we can and what we should be recording. And also, when are we going to report those outcomes? How often is that going to happen, right? All right, so this is what this might look like. This is just an example. This is an example that I have seen some folks that I've worked with in the past use. I really like it a lot, which is why I have brought it in here today. Remember, I am sending out these slides in this recording. So if you like this example, you can pull it straight out of the PowerPoint. But essentially, this is just going to help you to set your goals. This kind of table is going to tell you kind of what types of grants, how are we getting our funding, right? Is it grants? Is it events? Is it federal grants? Is it donation campaigns? How are we getting that? And then what are our goals for each of those areas of funding? How much do we want, and what do we want to do with that? What projects are those going to fund? And being able to kind of draw those lines, right? This much money, and it's going to go here, and here's how we're going to report on it. And, here's the project it's going to serve. That's really important. So again, this is a structure. Without this structure, We run into chaos. This becomes so overwhelming. It's not efficient. Everyone gets stressed out, and that's what we're trying to avoid, right? All right. Number 4, which is my pro tip. So it's a step, but it's also a pro tip. And that is, if you're thinking about programs, you might think about them as projects. So what's the difference? What is the difference between a program and a project? Well, a project has a clear beginning, middle, and end, right? There's a start and there's a finish to a project. And a programming is ongoing, right? But a program is what fulfills your mission. So how do we connect these? How do we make sense of this, right? Well, a lot of the time people are really specific and clear about programs, but maybe they're not thinking about it in terms of a project with clear goals. So we have sort of a high level mission that we're trying to accomplish with our program. What does that look like next month? What does it look like next year? You know, that kind of a thing. So I think it's, I like to think about this through an example. It's a good example, I think, to kind of help us get clear on what I'm talking about here. So I talked with a nonprofit not long ago that does after school tutoring program, right? And so an ongoing problem that they're having is getting sufficient funding for general operating expenses. This comes up a lot. I'm sure there's plenty of you in here that have also struggled with this, right? And so we sort of were thinking about, okay, how do we think about getting funding and not necessarily being so competitive with all the other organizations out there that are also looking for general funding. And what we sort of thought about is, let's think about this as a clear project with a clear goal, right? So instead of sort of going from, hey, we need a general operating fund for general funds, I'm instead going to position this as a project where I'm trying to double my capacity of online tutoring programs. So instead of a general sort of, you know, general, right? I'm very specific in what I'm working on. What does this money goes towards, and what are my end goals with this money? So the more specific I can get, the easier my proposal will be to write. I can also sort of focus in on grants that are specific to like programming, for example, instead of general grants. And there I'm not competing as much with other organizations for that same dollar. And so the funders, they'll be like, they'll get that. They'll say, oh, there's a beginning, there's a middle, there's an end, there's a goal. There's something tangible that my dollars are going to do. And funders love that, right? They love to be able to see that. So just think about, can you kind of move from this kind of program thing into sort of a project thing? Drew, yes, that's a great point. I'm going to touch on that. Let's come back to that question at the end for sure, because I just want to make sure we kind of get through all this. But I think you're right. And there's definitely ways to do general funding. And as I jump into the demo here in a minute, I will show you how to kind of specifically look for that. Okay, step 5 is to create a weighted decision matrix. And so really what we're doing here is we need to figure out what works for your organizations. There's tons of decision matrices out there. We have an awesome workshop on decision matrices on the blog. You can just Google that. And again, there's some information about decision matrices in that 40-page guide that I'm giving all of you at the end of here if you want it. So stick with me for that. But essentially, there's going to be different factors that we want to include in our matrix. And what this matrix does is it allows us to consistently kind of rate opportunities in a way where we're kind of comparing apples to apples. And then it spits out a number and it says, this is a 4, that one's a 2, this one's a 3. And all of a sudden I know, okay, well, I'm going to focus my energy on the 4. Why would I focus my energy on a 2, right? And so that is kind of what we're doing. So some different things to include in your matrix, again, going to be dependent upon your organization, but thinking about alignment to goals. What is the number of past grantees? You know, do they fund, you know, specifically in my area, how many grantees have they funded in my, you know, in Texas, for example, instead of in California? I'm also going to look at things like what kind of award amount are they doing? If this is an organization that's doing $2,000 grants and I need $50,000, maybe it's not a priority. You know, maybe I focus my sights on those larger dollar amounts first. Then there's things like, you know, does my team have the bandwidth to do this? What is this going to require? Another little pro tip that I have, usually the longer the RFP, the more reporting is going to be required from it, right? So you want to think about that as you're kind of planning this. And then thinking about competition, if a foundation is mostly giving their funding to new grantees, that's great, because that means that you're not going to be competing as much with, potentially organizations that are mostly giving to folks they already know. And we'll talk about it when we go through the demo, but what I like to think about is the percentage of repeat grantees. So if they're 30% or above new grantees, that's great. That's a great place to be. That's not a very competitive place to be. Under 30% new grantees, it's starting to get a little sharky in there. So you might want to just think about that as you prioritize. And then finally, do I have an existing relationship? Is there something that I can do to kind of help push my proposal through? And that might weight the opportunity a little bit higher as well, right? Okay. All right. So if you want to level up, again, I know I've talked about it a couple of times. I've got a tool. I will give it to you guys at the end of this. It's part of our go versus no go tool, and it includes 16 questions to help you evaluate. And it also includes some information on decision matrices. All right, so how do we find good fit funders? We know how to evaluate them. We know why it's important. We know, what is prospect research and why grants matter. But how do we actually go about finding these folks, right? Well, there's a couple ways. Honestly, the easiest way is Instrumentl. And I'll show you kind of why that is in a second. It was built for efficiency. It was built to speed up this process. But there's some other options out there, right? You can use Google. You can go to funder websites. They have a lot of their information online. 990s are available. They're public information that, again, is required documentation from the foundations, required by the IRS, right? It's like your tax documents, but for a foundation. And you can find those through GuideStar. You can find them through the IRS website. Things like ProPublica, there's some other paid resources out there to help you find, but really, we think Instrumentl is the easiest to use. And the reason for that is that it was built specifically with efficiency in mind. It was built specifically to speed all of this up. It only has active opportunities, which means if you see it on the platform, it is available to be applied for. It's got 990 reports and all that information at your fingertips. And then once you set it up, and this is kind of my favorite part, once you set up your search, it's going to search for you in the background. It's sending you an email every week saying, hey, you've got a new match. So you can set it up. It's almost like a personal assistant, and then you can kind of forget it and just see things that pop up. And when you have the bandwidth, you can sort of dive in there, right? And what does that all leave us with? Well, it saves our clients 3 hours a week, right? So our people on the platform are saving time, and they're increasing their grant output in the first year by 78%. So pretty substantial there. We have some new features. I'll show you that in a minute, but first, I want to kind of walk us through how to set up. I want to walk us through kind of how to set up. Oops. Let me just make sure I'm sending this to the right person. There we go. I want to walk us through how to set up our projects. So I would love to have you follow along with me. No pressure if you're not interested. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you how to set up a project. And then you can leave today with a list of good fit funders, whether you end up becoming a paying customer of Instrumentl or you use your 14 days free and that's it. This is going to be a really valuable moment for you to kind of see what this looks like in practice, be able to poke around in there and see what is coming up for an organization like yours. So here's what I want us to do. I want everyone to kind of click on that link that I just dropped in the chat there. You will end up seeing a screen which looks like this if you click on that link. So go ahead and fill that out. Just a reminder, Instrumentl is best for organizations that are US-based 501c3s. With more than 90K in operating revenue. So if you're in that group, definitely follow along. You'll see lots of sort of opportunities for you. If you're not in that group, you're still welcome to follow along. You just may find that this is slightly less relevant for you, but definitely hang on because I'll show you how some of this stuff works. And then I will do that freebie for you towards the end here. So go ahead and fill this out. When you're through this part, let's get a thumbs up. Would you guys just give me kind of a thumbs up in the chat once you get through the sort of part of just kind of filling this in? I'm going to follow along with you. I'm going to show you what this looks like here. But yeah, if you all would go ahead and just give me a thumbs up when you're ready. But essentially, I'm gonna follow along with you here. So I'm going to sign up here. I'm going to tell them a little bit about myself. Oh, and you know what? I didn't use the right link. So let me fix that really quick. There we go. Okay. All right, so you're gonna fill this out and you're just gonna tell some information. So go ahead and do this. When you get through this portion, I would love to see a thumbs up, and then I will know that we can move forward. So go ahead and fill this out, and then give me a little thumbs up so that I know that you are you're ready to kind of move on to the next section here. So I'm going to go through this. I'm going to fill this out. You will see this thing, onboarding session. Go ahead and set it up. This is how you're going to get the most out of your free trial, because you can talk to one of our team members. They will make sure that this is all dialed in for you. So I'm going to skip it just so that we can kind of keep our time moving here, but you all should kind of figure that out. All right, let me know when you get to this page. I don't see any, I don't see any thumbs up yet. So go ahead and just let me know if you're still working on it or if you are kind of through this page. Here we go. All right, there's one coming straight to me. Couple thumbs ups. Don't worry if it's taking you just a minute. You can go ahead and kind of get that stuff set up. But yeah, give me a thumbs up. Give me a thumbs up when you're ready, please. And then I'll know I can move forward here. Okay, cool. I'm going to sort of start going here. This is all very sort of self-explanatory. I think these first two steps here. So you can go ahead and sort of when you get through, because I've got a couple thumbs ups coming straight to me here. So feel free to drop to everybody too. You don't have to just send it to me. But yeah, let's go ahead and kind of get started here. So I'm going to tell them a little bit about where I'm based. I'm based here in Colorado. I'm going to tell them what my fiscal year is. And then when I get to this kind of next section here, I'm going to tell them my project. Thanks, Heather. Yeah. When I get to this next section, project is what specifically I'm looking for funding for. So this may not be general. This might be specific. So in this example, I'm going to say I am running a kind of entrepreneurship business education program, sort of helping people support. Got it. Yeah, Tina, sorry. It is sort of specific to the US, but definitely follow along with us through the screen, because I think you'll see some interesting stuff here. So essentially, I'm going to call this curriculum development. And I'm going to tell them I'm a nonprofit. It's going to ask me if I'm faith-based. If I was, I could hit yes, and then I could fill this information in here. I am not, so I'm going to hit no. And then we get to kind of this section here where we're going to fill out our project details. So I'm going to go ahead and walk us through this. This is another section. Once we get through this, give me a thumbs up, right? And then I'll kind of jump into how we can use some of these things. So I'm going to say I am inside the US. My project is going to take place in specific states and counties. This is my pro tip. Always choose specific locations. You will find way more matches that way. So I'm going to hit this. And I'm going to tell them kind of like, where do I operate? Well, I will operate in everywhere in Colorado, but specifically in Broomfield County, Boulder County, Denver County, and Jefferson County. And then I also, just because there's a lot of overlap with Southern Wyoming, I also operate down here, or I guess up there in Wyoming. So I'm going to hit confirm. So now I'm telling it a little bit of information about myself, and this is going to help me to get those really good fit organizations and those good fit funders for my kind of area. All right, then fields of work, right? So this is where I'm telling them, what do I work on? What is my organization focused on? I say, if you're new to this, go through and kind of click on through some of the stuff and figure out what is most relevant for you. I like community services. I like Economic services, yes. I like entrepreneurship, yes. I think that's business. Well, no, not so much that. So that's in the community section. And then because this is a training program, I'm also going to education. I'm going to say business education. I'm going to say educational access and equity, definitely. Yeah, and I think that that's it. So then I'll update those. 3 to 7 is a really good place to be. So 3 to 7 in that kind of field of work there. So think about that. And then I'm going to tell them what size grants. I like to put a minimum. I think if it's less than 1,000, it's probably not really worth my time. So I leave it at 1,000 minimum and then no max, right? Sky's the limit. And then this goes back to that earlier question that I had on sort of why are we looking for these grants? So to your kind of earlier question, Drew, about general operating expenses, if that is what you're looking for, you can go ahead and click that. I'm going to say education, I'm going to say program, and I'm going to say, capacity and training. And that can be something, capacity building can be staff. It could also be technology. So if you are sort of trying to bring on a piece of tech to help you fund more, you can do that as well. All right, I'm going to hit save and exit. When I get here, I'm going to skip this part because I'm not adding any team members right now. But if you have some team members, you can definitely do that. All right, and then this is going to bring me here. So when we get to this page, let's get a thumbs up from everyone who's been following along with me. Go ahead and give me a thumbs up here if you get to this page. This is telling me how many grants I have matched. So as you can see, I already have 311 grants matched for me. Like I said, going forward, this is just going to keep looking for me in the background. So it's just going to keep digging through using the criteria that I gave it. It's like having an intern or a personal assistant in my pocket working for me in the background. I can set this, I can forget it, and then I'm good. All right, let's get some thumbs up from anyone who's following along with me here once you get to this page. I think I got one straight to me. Let's give it another second and let you guys kind of catch up here. I don't want to move too far ahead without everybody. Okay, there's another one straight to me. Thank you. Cool, cool, cool. All right, I'm going to get going here just for the sake of time, but you can always, if you had to rush through your project, you can always come up here to this edit project button and go back in and change anything that you need to change. But essentially, this looks like an email inbox, probably potentially to you all, depending on what kind of email you use. And that's basically what this is. This is all these good fit funders based on the information that I gave it. On the left-hand side, I can kind of dig through here and I can see, what's going on with City Foundation. I can read a little bit about kind of what their focus is and get some high-level information. What are the fields of work that they're working on? What kind of funding uses? What are they willing to fund? Well, projects, education, training, and research. Okay, cool. That kind of works for me, right? You can also always search by best match. You can change some of this. You can filter. So if I know I'm really great at private organizations, I can go in here and I can say, I just want to look at private organizations. I can also decide based on the funding, what I need the funding for, and I can filter that way too, right? So once I'm in here, on the right-hand side is where I'm getting more information on this organization. So some key information on sort of when the due dates are. I've got some contact information up here. And then I can go in here, and this is where I'm going to see some more detailed information. This is digitizing 990 reports. I can go through here. I can see who are key people. I can look at key financial stats. What does their giving look like over the years? Is it increasing? Is it decreasing? Are they giving in my area? Yep, mostly Colorado, right? And then what do new grantees look like? How much are they giving to new grantees versus repeat grantees? So yeah, this is really great kind of detailed information in here. Once I like something, I can save it to my tracker. This is where it really gets good, because once I get into my tracker, I can see everything that's going on here, right? And I can add something to plans. I can sort of update the status, update how much I'm asking for. I can add tasks. So if I want to tell my other team members to work on something, I can do that as well. So this is really how we're keeping that system going, that process, and we're staying really organized and cutting out the chaos. So that's really high level here. I'm going to sort of stop my share and get, oops, that's not what I meant to do. I'm going to kind of jump back in here and just make sure that we can kind of close up all together. Do you guys have everything that you need? Okay, so we talked about a couple different things today, right? We talked about first, why grants are important. They're a great way to diversify your funding. We talked about 5 steps that we can use to prepare ourselves for grants. And then we talked about how we can use Instrumentl to sort of turbocharge that and like turn everything on and develop that system and dig in there. If you learned something new, definitely come to some more of our workshops. I am going to drop a link right now into the chat for all of our upcoming events are right there. So go ahead and sort of check that out. We've got a couple different things coming up that are going to be really great, including a fireside chat with the grant doctor herself, Bev, in October. So you'll definitely want to check that out. If you want to follow up with me, here's all my contact information. Again, if you love Instrumentl and you want to potentially get some money off, jot down those codes, reach out to me, tell me what you thought. I'd love to hear from you. And then finally, our freebie. Okay, so if you're interested in the freebie, I just dropped a link into the chat. Just tell me really quick what you thought about this presentation. Did you like me? Did you like what I had to say? Was it helpful? What did you take away from it? It'll take you about 2 minutes to fill out, and then directly to your inbox, you will get this 40-page research piece, which includes a lot of information on decision matrices, 16 really important questions to ask when you are evaluating prospects, and some other really awesome information here. So you are going to go ahead and figure that out. And I think that that's it for me. I'm dropping the sign up link one more time. If you want to get those 14 days free, that's a special for Garrett.com readers. So go ahead and click that number. But otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. Thank you to everyone who attended today. Definitely fill out that feedback form and tell me what you thought. And I hope to see you again at another event here soon. Thank you so much. All right. Thanks, everybody. Bye. Thanks, Tina. Bye, Drew. All right. Bye.